Welcome back. This is the second portion of the 4.4 video series, and this one's going to talk all about perpendicular lines. And you'll see there are some similarities once we get into the thick of it. But first, let's talk about what a perpendicular line is. Perpendicular lines are lines that do intersect, but they intersect at precisely a 90-degree angle, also known as a right angle. So we're going to do a little bit of geometry, or at least some of the precursors to what you'll be doing in geometry. So since the lines intersect at a 90-degree angle, what that means for us in algebra is that the slopes are opposite reciprocals. Okay, I slow down and say that way for a reason. It's an important term. Slopes are opposite reciprocals. Okay, now you're still working on the same note sheet, but you're going to want to flip over to the back or find some empty white space because we're going to talk about what that term means. What is an opposite reciprocal? Well, it's made up of two parts. And the first part is opposite. Okay, if numbers are opposite, that means we have flipped the sign from positive to negative or from negative to positive. So for example, if we have -4, its opposite is +4. If we have +6, its opposite is -6. Okay, so when we say it's opposite, we mean we have flipped the sign. It's gone from positive to negative or negative to positive. Now, what's a reciprocal? Well, with a reciprocal, we have now flipped a fraction. Now, we could get into about the definition of what a fraction is and what definition of rational numbers are, but for right now, just understand this. If I have 4/5, the reciprocal is 5/4. Okay, so we just take the numerator, make it the denominator, make the denominator into the numerator. 4/5 becomes 5/4. And also, more commonly, 6 becomes 1/6. And that's the one I kind of want to draw our attention to because 4/5 becomes 5/4 is easy to see, but some of us really get tripped up with 6 becoming 1/6. Understand that 6 is 6 wholes, or 6 over 1, so it becomes 1 over 6. Now, if we have an opposite reciprocal, well, what that means is we have to do both things at once. So an opposite reciprocal means we flip the sign and flip the fraction. So that 6 now becomes negative, that's the opposite part, 1/6. Okay, take a minute, make sure this is all jotted down. We're going to do some practice on the next slide. Okay, take a moment now, jot these down as some examples and write down their opposite reciprocals. So look at 14, look at -13, and see if you can come up with what the opposite reciprocals would be. I'll give you a hint on the first one. The opposite reciprocal of 14 would be -1 over 14. Okay, I'll show that here in a minute. Take a moment, pause the video, try these other examples out. Okay, let's take a look. So as I mentioned before, 14 becomes -1 over 14. Flip the sign from positive to negative, flip the fraction to 14 over 1 to 1 over 14. -13, 1 over 13. -2/3, +3/2. +9/11, -11/9. +1/2, -2. Okay, those ones where they get tricky, all right? Give you these 5 examples. Trust me, you'll have lots of practice and do more and more of these. So work with each other and ask questions if you need to. Now, all of that was just to help us get the new slope, right? We're still doing the same thing we did in the previous video and really the same thing we've done in the previous sections. We're just finding new ways to find the slope of the line that it is we're trying to write the equation for. Now, in order to do that, we need the opposite reciprocal of whatever the old line is that they give us. So let's look at an example. First off, I'm going to make your life a little easier. The example in the notes gives you the equation in standard form. Let's just cut the corners here. 2x plus 4y equals 16. That's the same thing as y equals 1/2 x plus 4. Okay, take a moment, jot that down so you can see that clearly, and then understand that we're going to be writing the equation for a line that's perpendicular to y equals -1/2 x plus 4, and goes through the point -4, 6. Now, once you've got that in your notes, we're ready to work through the chart. And understand this chart is exactly the same chart that we used for parallel lines. The first thing that we have to do, identify the type of slope needed to find m. In this case, we need the opposite reciprocal slope. So if we take the -1 over the first slope, that's the same thing as saying opposite reciprocal. That gives us our new slope. And in this case, what that will be is we take the opposite reciprocal of -1/2. Well, that negative becomes positive. That 1 over 2 becomes 2 over 1. So we have positive 2 over 1, or just 2 for our slope. Happens to be the same as the previous example. Go figure. Now, again, once we have our slope of 2, we know we have y equals mx plus b. Plug in what we know. We know our y is 6, so we plug the 6 in for y. We just found out that the new m is going to be 2, so we plug 2 in for m. And we know that the x value for the new point is -4, so that goes in for x. Once again, the only thing we don't know is b. Once again, we're doing the same thing we've been doing since 4.1.4.2. Simplify, multiply 2 times -4, you get -8. Add the 8 to both sides. B is 14. I know b, I know m, I know y equals mx plus b. Okay, let's be clear about something, guys, as you were finished and jotting this all down. The only thing that's changing is how we find m. Once we find m, whether it's using the slope formula between 2 points, or parallel line, or perpendicular line with the opposite reciprocal, everything else falls into place the same way we've been doing it for a while now. Okay, so at the very least, don't get freaked out about these 3 steps. If you have some trouble figuring out the slope at this point, that's fine. That's what we're here to practice. But don't let yourself get too freaked out about everything after that. Once you've got the slope, everything just goes as normal. Okay? Let's look at an example. Write an equation in slope-intercept form of a line that passes through 4, 7 and is perpendicular to the graph of y equals 2/3 x minus 1. Pause the video, take a moment to take a crack at this one, and then we'll come back. Okay, let's compare what you did to what I did. I started off with my first slope, which is 2/3, taken directly from here. Okay, then I found the new slope, which is the opposite reciprocal. Flip the sign, flip the fraction. Then I plugged in what I know. I got my slope, so that's the only thing that's different. Here's my m, here's my y, here's my x. Plug those 3 in, solve for b. Now, -3/2 times 4 comes out as -6. Add the 6 to both sides. B equals 13. I've got b. I've got m. Y equals mx plus b. Okay. Again, I'm going to say this one more time. The only thing that's new is how you find the slope. And yes, you have to do this weird opposite reciprocal thing that maybe you've seen before, maybe you don't, probably don't remember either way. Once we get past that, though, it's the same thing we've been doing, okay? So at the very least, feel good about doing these last 4 lines. Have a little bit of trouble with the first 2. That's what today is for, okay? So, to review, what have we covered in these 2 videos? Understand that 1, if 2 lines are parallel, they have the same slope. If 2 lines are perpendicular, their slopes are opposite reciprocals of each other. And if you need to find opposite reciprocals, you flip the sign, you flip the fraction. Use all this information to get your new line with your new slope. We'll call that M2. And then plug in what you know. Same thing we've been doing. The new slope, your x, your y, find b. Okay? That's all we have for this video, ladies and gentlemen. If you need to review any parts of this, feel free to do so. The video will be available on Schoology if it's not already, so you can check it out there. Otherwise, get started on the second half of the worksheet, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you.